Oh, there it is. Okay, cool. For some reason, it's not letting me do it on Instagram again, which.
Oh, just wait a moment. It takes a minute. And I know this is obnoxious. Hello, everyone who's here. We are waiting.
Wait, there we go.
Yeah, it should.
Yay.
Mine is.
Okay.
I'm still waiting on mine. Okay. I will let you speak. Sorry, I'll let you get us started while I fiddle around with this.
Yeah, no, I'm bopping around because I'm very pleased with myself this morning too. I've been getting a lot done in anticipation for my trip, and I get to relax for like a full day before having to
Yeah.
go. So I'm very like happy with the 3 weeks of content I did in 1 week. Yay. So hello to everybody. Speaking of content, this is Vivi Henriette, and I am KristaLyn and Sofia, and we are the Ask Me Astros. And every week we like to jump on live and do sort of an Ask Me Astros impromptu coffee chat where we will talk about what's going on in astrology and answer questions from people who comment. And this is sort of the sample size of the monthly Ask Me Astros that we do, where we answer a specific question specific to a natal chart of someone who goes to askmeastros.com and asks their question and then gives us their chart, and we will do like a whole feature of the anonymous chart. So this is who we are. This is what we're doing. And we had some previous discussion before this about some interesting patterns that are occurring right now, both surrounding issues of peace and the alternative, as well as the Oscars. So
yes,
hi,
and
Vivi.
I am wonderful. I am just, I am not ignoring you. I am.
Hi, Amber.
2 moments. I'm trying to see. It's funny. I handed it over. My Instagram is now being obnoxious, so we're gonna try this one more time. How was your weekend? Let's start. I'm gonna have you keep talking while I just do one more
What
thing.
was my weekend? Oh, you know what was interesting? So you know me, right? I'm early to bed, early to rise, and there's really nothing in between.
Yes.
I noticed, especially on astrologers threads, everybody was talking about crying a lot with the new moon in Pisces. I took a nap and it was awesome because the air pressure here has been really bad and it's been giving me migraines reminiscent of like pre-surgery. So I was like, Dan, I need to get specifically pink Woody Woodpecker sunglasses that have blinders on the sides because I got them when I was 9 and I used them for so long when I had migraines that they actually helped. And so I had a lot of lack of sleep, but I feel like I made up for it a little bit on Sunday, where we had a day where plans were canceled. It was lovely and we didn't have anything we had to do. So we did things that like we felt like doing. And I'm biding my energy in preparation for travel to Egypt because travel takes a lot out of me, but destinations and journeys are my favorite. So,
Oh man.
how was yours?
Okay. I am, and we will hop into this Oscar talk. Thank you, everyone who let me tour here. I got us live on IG and all the places now.
It was a great weekend, Amber. Thank you. My comment on my IG.
Oh, sorry. Our frequent special guest technical difficulties. Yes, Gabe. Yes.
Yes.
I am just so happy Mercury has moved into Aries. I literally felt like the life returned to me. It has been, and maybe this is, personal, but it just was like really, I could feel like the heaviness. That's where I am. So
yeah, no,
delightful.
I completely relate. Mercury is not my Mercury is not doing great. Mercury is combust with the sun, perhaps at Fosses, but we can't really tell unless we were there. And I mean, I was there, but I was a little preoccupied becoming alive. So when Mercury does things, because he rules my 8th house and my midheaven, I never really know where I'm at. And so if I find that when Mercury's not doing well, that's when I feel like God hates me a little bit and I got to figure out what's going on. So when Mercury finally got out of detriment and fall in Pisces and came into Aries, it was like, okay, can we all be nice to each other now for a second? Because I've got actual magic I need to perform. So it was nice, but I also feel like that anoretic degree of Pisces may have been part of the problem with my sleep.
Oh my God, I love the God hates me transit. For you, it's the Mercury and Pisces natally in my 8th. It's my mind hates me. And so it's just a lot of like, and
yeah,
a lot of crying. I had all around, a lot of emoting for people. I
Mhm.
looked at the chart this morning and I was like looking at Mars, like past the square to Uranus, and I was like, we did it.
We did that one. Now we just have to look at Uranus getting Jupiter coming up and stuff. And it's, oh my goodness. There's so
I mean,
many
there's more.
interesting things coming up in the next few months. For the rest of March, I can breathe. There is an eclipse coming up, but yeah.
Um, okay. So I this morning I sent you the Oscar chart because I was interested to think about
Mhm.
the history of the
Oh, hey,
Oscars,
Rick.
what's going on,
Right.
and some mundane stuff. But I actually wanted to start with a conversation for you. So all of that for me
Yeah.
came out of a dinner conversation I was having with some people.
Mhm.
And for people who don't like study astrology on maybe a I'll just say like the level that we do, particularly you do, Gabe. Um, and I think that people fail to understand that there's so many astrologies, right? Like
Mhm.
they think that maybe they see some sun sign stuff and think that astrology is maybe the psychological stuff, which it can be. This is not me putting down anything.
There's a
I'm
branch
wondering,
for that.
huh?
There's a branch for that.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering though, when you're like with people and they have no
Mhm.
idea, right? This is a question I've been trying to ask a lot of us, all astrologers I meet. How
Mhm.
do you like what is astrology at its essence for you?
It depends on who I'm talking to.
Okay.
Because for every person, I'm going to engage differently in a conversation. And so for every person, if I'm going to use astrology, it's going to be to meet them where they're at. And so when someone just asks me out of the blue, what is astrology? I get a little bit stuck because I haven't been able to test the waters yet. So I'll admit
Mhm.
that. And I'll say, it's a 5,000 plus year tradition that we get to draw from that can help you understand how your natal chart isn't just a personality profile, though it can do that too. It's also this ball of yarn that unwinds throughout your life. And so you get these
Mm.
moments that really activate certain parts of your chart, which we call the natal promise. And using specific timing techniques or transit things, which is also a timing technique, we can see how things are going in your life and work with it instead of resisting or feeling like you're a failure because you're in a moment of life that isn't as active or isn't doing what society thinks you should be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm gonna um, read Devin's comment in a moment, but
Yeah.
you know, building off of that, when people, because this is one of the things I was running into like last night, when people, argue against like fate, right? And again, I know we're going to big things, but like, what is your sort of line for the conversation between fate and free will? I know, right? And by the way,
No.
anyone else can chime in. Gabe, chime in too. I just say Gabe because I love Gabe, but also Devin. Um, who else? Whoever else is here, I can't read everyone's name.
Yeah. So Amber, absolutely yes about finding specifics in conversations to gain a footing. But when I first moved down here, my brother-in-law, when they found out I was an astrologer, were like, okay, so fate and free will, is it real? Or free will, is it real? And I was like, honestly, it doesn't matter because you feel like it is. So like, why fuss over it? Also, like, I can tell you what I think because I study the results of like cause and effect and that kind of stuff in astrology, but it wouldn't help you decide for yourself. And also, if you're going to get stuck on that, just don't because you have at least the illusion of free will. So exercise it and just know that you can actually trust that whole the universe has got your back for better or for worse, whether that's tough love or super soft and fluffy love. That's to be determined by the timing techniques. But I believe that when it comes to fate and free will, if I'm talking to someone, I just say if you feel like you have free will, use it, and if you don't, let's talk about why you feel stuck, and then we'll move on from there.
I love that. And I guess maybe more specifically, when people are like hesitant about astrology because they think
Mhm.
it's going to somehow take away their free will, right? Like there's this
Yeah.
mechanism for telling me that my life is fated in these particular ways. Um, I have my own comments on that, but before I'll
Yeah.
share, I'll just have you.
Yeah, that's sensitive. Again, depends on where the person's at. If they're distressed by that already, you want to give them something that makes them feel comfortable, and you want to give them something that helps them realize they have more control and sphere of influence than they may be giving themselves credit for. So for me, it's not my chart controls me. My chart gives me an outline, and I can work with the resources and see them coming and build in advance. It's kind of like Legos. I can build with the tools that I can see coming, and I can plan ahead. Being my Virgo midheaven and my Taurus sun, I love, well, Scorpio rising and moon also make me a control freak. So like any opportunity to feel
Yeah.
more in control, I take. And that's one of the things that astrology has helped me with, because many people know I actually got into astrology initially because I needed to hack God's timing because I got sick of people telling me to wait for it. So for me, it was like, well, if it's fated anyway, because God said so, I might as well get the notes. And that's kind of what I got into. But I do think there's this um, passage that astrologers go through when you're getting into astrology, where you go through the, wow, I can understand so much from this. Oh my God, I can understand so much from this. Oh my God, I don't have any control at all. And then you get past that point where you start forgetting your own chart, and you start forgetting that you have a transit that day, and you're just into the astrology and you kind of live with it rather than letting it kind of hang over your head. But I think that that is something that we all process in our journey of learning astrology too. I don't think I would take that away from someone, but I would definitely hold their hand while they go through it.
Absolutely. And then I'm going to add one comment to that, and then I want to read some of these comments, or you can read the comments. But yeah, I think part of it, it's interesting. Some things that I think I sometimes, well, I don't know. It's a nice reminder to people, right? That fate can be something as simple as the family you were born into, right? Like we don't have control of that, right? Like I came into the world a certain place, you came into a world at a certain place, and like that is fate, right? Like I can't go back and like choose this. But there is something really comforting baseline looking at an astrology chart and seeing those difficulties, if there were difficulties, or seeing
Yeah.
those gifts and being able to have that reflected to you, and knowing that, right, like there are some things that you just sort of came into that this chart reflects, but that also, like you said, there are ways to work with that. And, you
Mhm.
know, almost by understanding what is fated, that we can actually expand our understanding of free will.
Yeah. My favorite thing when I'm with a client is when they're going through a hard time and we can see which transit or aspect or timing technique started it, because then we can see roughly how long that's going to last, and we can come up with something to do to keep them sane in the meantime, or to make it so that one of the things I like to say is, you're going to be telling this story in a couple months of how you handled this. How do you want to tell the story? Do it now. Like, do the thing now to make sure you tell the story the way you want it to be told later. Um, and that's what life is. It's gonna end up, this is a Doctor Who quote, but we're all stories in the end, so we might as well make it a good one.
Oh,
And I
I
really
love
love that. Yeah, I
that.
know. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, Izzy B over here in my Instagram also said that life is kind of like Sims. You can let them have autonomy, but sometimes you put things in their path that influence their life. And I think you could say that for transit techniques. Like, we're wandering around, but then something happens and it's like, oh, this is a moment, and I have to react or respond to it. And so kind of, it is like The Sims. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that. I think I played The Sims like once. I'm sorry, I just had a flashback to like some YouTube video I saw of someone who like was playing The Sims and like got their character pregnant like 1,000 times or something really just brutal. Anyway,
Yeah. I couldn't
do you
handle
want to
playing The
read?
Sims because they had too many needs. So, like, every time I was trying to do something, they'd be like waving at me that they needed food or to go to the bathroom or some other kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm making art. So I would not be a good God, is what I've realized.
That sounds like a kind of hell. I do,
Yeah.
yeah. Being God is hell. Okay, I'm gonna read some comments.
Yeah.
Devin says, okay, so we're talking about what is astrology, right? I
Mhm.
love these big questions. And it's the philosophy of astronomy. Nice. Love that. Gabe, what is astrology? A way of making sense of human life by understanding the past, being aware of the present, and seeing into the future.
You can
That's
tell
good.
that such thought went into that. And of course it did, because it's Gabe, but I really like that.
And I'm like looking, I'm like, how do I save this comment?
Right? Screenshot it.
Okay, I'm gonna screenshot that. And then do you want to read Devin's last quote?
Yeah. So Devin says fate equals the choices we're given, free will equals the choices we make. And I think that that's really astute as well.
I love it. Literally just took a screenshot. So good.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we talk about the Oscars? Like how this whole conversation got started?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was, you know, again, with some people last night having a conversation talking about, we got started talking about the history of the Oscars. And I thought it was actually, Devin's going to probably chime in and school me here. But we were talking about how it sort of started as a like union busting event, right? This idea of like, let's give the people some awards to pretend like things aren't shitty. Okay, I'm actually going to read a quote here and not just try to paraphrase.
I have charts as well if you want to be able to show them.
Okay, good. Here, let me actually share your. Is it
I have to share my screen. That's okay. It's actually within my power to do this.
Okay, so you're going to share the screen. Yeah. I'm going to read the quote.
There you go. And now we just need to bring it into the screen. There we go.
Thanks for everyone. This is okay. This, by the way, is from a really fun Teen Vogue article because somehow Teen Vogue is like saving my life all the time. It's incredible, really. DeCherney argues the awards were designed so talent would think of themselves as artists rather than laborers, thereby driving a wedge between them and technical union workers. Giving people awards, quote, giving people awards show that what they do is creative rather than labor, DeCherney explains. Also, it awards a few individuals rather than thinking about the much larger community of actors and writers. Most don't get awards or even get invited to ceremony. Okay.
So I highlighted on the chart the aspect that I think most reflects that quote.
Yeah.
And it's the Venus trine Neptune. Venus specifically being in the 6th house of workers and in detriment, and Neptune being up in the 10th of recognition in Leo, the illusion of recognition for workers.
By the way, before we think about the houses, I think I put a 7 p.m. start time because that's what it is now.
Yeah, it's 7:30 now. It's usually 8.
7:30. Okay, cool. So I couldn't. The first Oscars took place at a dinner, and I couldn't for the life of me find an exact time. So just keep that in mind. If anyone can figure this out, like let me know.
Yeah, especially if it took place in LA. 7 p.m. in Los Angeles, though. It starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time now. So.
Oh, good. That's why it's like
this
4
actually
o'clock
might
here.
Be more accurate than you think. This would be around 4 p.m. towards 5 p.m. But 7 p.m. would have been a good dinner time in Los Angeles. So it might be accurate. I can Google and see if I can find a more accurate. Oh, actually, a friend of mine who's in theater says that it was a lunch.
What?
It was a lunch that it started at. So we might be better off with like a noon chart.
Oh, wait, where are you hearing that though? It was a lunch.
A comment in my feed.
Well, I was Googling last night. I was obsessive and I was getting dinner menus. So I think we need to do some research.
Yeah. But we still have that Venus, Aries, and Leo, Neptune, which if you even get rid of the houses, still does kind of reflect what we were talking about. And if we get a good time, I'll edit the chart as well. I can show you all how to edit charts in Luna. It's very, very easy. Yeah.
If anyone does, I was looking it up last night and I was finding like dinner menus and things like this, but I couldn't find a time. And I'd be curious to know if there was a lunch. So if anyone wants to do more work, but I thought the day chart was enough. I wanted to sort of state that. And I was,
Well, we also have this Sun-Jupiter conjunction near the node, which would not have changed based on the hour. So that's something interesting to think about for an award ceremony. Being in in Taurus, that means that they're going through a Jupiter return coming up this year as well. And I have noticed based on the article you sent that they are trying. Oh no, there was an article I think I did because one of the things I noticed when I thought about, you mentioned protests were going on outside the Oscars. And so I wanted to do more research on that kind of nature. And so when we looked at Venus trine Neptune, I brought up the Oscars So White movement that happened in 2015. So I'm going to bring up, it's a synastry wheel, but it does the job. what we had that day, so the outer wheel here for everybody, inner wheel is the same as what we just saw. It's the same chart.
Yeah.
The outer wheel is now the Oscars So White movement, and we get to compare the two charts. So it looks like a lot, but it's actually just the chart from before with the chart from after on the outside. And so what we have is Oscars So White started off the Saturn return period for them. But also when you look at Saturn during the original Oscars was trine Neptune. And Saturn during Oscars So White was approaching the square to transit Neptune. It was square Mars at the time. And if we come to today, of course, we know that Saturn is currently in Pisces, approaching Neptune to conjoin next year as they tumble into Aries together. So there seems to be a Saturn-Neptune cycle going on with the Oscars as well, and their growth, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I love that. I also just was thinking about the, like, I'm blind. I'm like looking at your chart and like just staring to the camera, like, sorry, everyone. No one wants to see that much of my face. Just thinking about that, like Jupiter, Sun, Rahu conjunction just feels just like excess to me in Taurus,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it almost feels just like a blatant like show of wealth,
Overindulgence.
overindulgence. Like it's something very and it's interesting thinking about, again, I don't know much about the film industry, but knowing that there are so many it's changing a lot. And with there have been strikes, and like we know it's sort of an industry under transition. And so interesting to think about like what that Jupiter return will be.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And of course, it doesn't occur right around Oscar season, so it'll be something that we probably see the effects of next Oscar season. But it's
Yeah.
something to be aware of if this is something that's an interest for people.
Yeah. Do you think I'm staring at that moon? Okay, the moon's
This
11
one?
degrees, so we're pretty sure we could say that the moon was in Virgo. Yeah,
Yeah, the
we can
moon's in Virgo.
count on that.
Yep. Yeah, the moon
I
only
was just
moves
thinking,
about 13 degrees, so it would have had to be way earlier in the day for the moon to have still been in Leo.
yeah. Yeah, I was thinking like, oh, it would be interesting, like Saturn moon opposition if that was close to the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was culminating at the midheaven, so there's something to be said there.
I like that this is the, like
Yeah.
the nerdiest Oscar talk because I don't know if any of us know anything about the Oscars. I don't know like I'm just like interested in like the history of the origins, but I don't
I
watch them.
know I know some by proxy because I was a theater kid.
Okay.
But also my husband loves watching the Oscars almost as a habit. And so we've watched them because it's just a tradition that he's had since
Yeah.
childhood. So we were watching them last night, and he knows the movies. He knows the producers. He knows, all the foreign stuff, and he's very into movies. So I have some understanding by proxy. Plus, I took a course once, but I had the professor of that course was my personal teacher for a long time as well for piano and everything, and he taught me a lot from like Buster Keaton all the way up. So I have this really great appreciation, especially if you've seen movies like Singing in the Rain. You can get a decent understanding of how actors used to work for production companies and they were signed on to those companies. Coming from working at Disney, I know a little bit about the history there because I understood how that worked. So again, not in depth, but I have some kind of understanding that goes into this.
I love that. So thinking about the chart of maybe last night, the origin chart of the Oscars and your experience watching them, do you have any like just thoughts on this chart and how it resonated from your
Yeah,
experience?
there was a lot. I'm going to remove the Oscars So White thing here so we can just look at the single chart.
Yeah,
Ta-da!
it's just like open up the chart and chat.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting that Venus is in her detriment for artists, but Mercury is in domicile in Gemini, though in the eighth house. So again, they belonged to production companies. It was very much these contracts with other things. And when I read the article that showed the original incentive for the Oscars as being this sort of like illusion creating power play. I think there's a lot here that does speak to that. You have Mars in Leo, being potentially, especially if it was a luncheon or something before sunset, Mars would be the out of sec malefic. But either way, Mars brings conflict to the Leonine kind of expression of individuality and putting yourself out there and that kind of stuff, and like rewards and awards. So it's kind of like a weaponized award, if you want to think about it that way, which I also thought was very interesting.
I love it. And even if we're just going to read this chart for a moment, which I think actually really works, we can just say this sort of this divinatory chart. It's going to speak in this moment. I don't know if this is the actual chart, but who cares?
The aspects are going to speak regardless. The houses we can just steer clear of.
Yes, but for a moment, I will read the houses and say it is interesting to think again in this moment that Venus, right, is in sort of the detriment. My brain's going across what's crossing me. Oh, yeah, the detriment Libra. I'm sorry, detriment Venus is in the 6th house of labor, right, trining its ruler, right, Mars in the 10th. Again, if we're reading this in the house of career and like reputation. So it's interesting that Venus is sort of like I won't say the word, but like stuck doing this sort of work.
Yeah.
Right. Like thinking about this idea of like production companies and people were assigned to studios, and it was very much like in a sense, right, like a labor job. That is sort of fantastic to think about.
Yeah. I just found,
also,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go on.
I found a New York Times article about the first Oscars. They only lasted 15 minutes because they were just a part of a banquet. So a banquet may have started in the afternoon and gone into evening or something, but I have not found the time of the start yet. So just wanted to point out that it was a very short thing.
Like that we're just.
Hang on, I found a PDF. Usually a PDF will give you a time. Let me see if I can find something here. I get very excited when I find like official documentation of stuff. It's great. Okay. Wow, I found the room, how much attendance cost, but they're not telling me what time. The results were given in advance to newspapers for publication.
Oh, it was a luncheon. I stand corrected. Oh my God, you're totally right. It was a luncheon. I just saw another menu. Stand corrected.
270 guest tickets.
We are on this.
They're not going to tell me what time it started. That's a bummer. Literally everything else, which is really funny. I'm just going to do a search of the PDF for the P.M.
By the way, this is what I did last night when I came home from having a delightful dinner with friends. I got on the computer and started researching the history of the Oscars and pulling charts, because this is something that really yokes us astrologers together. We can't just go have fun and come home and go to bed. We have to be obsessed with these things.
And also you have to wonder about the date here, because the recipients of the awards were announced 3 months publicly ahead of the ceremony. So they just went there to receive their awards. They already knew they won. So
but how does it work now?
Now you don't know until the envelope's opened, except for the next decade, according to History of the Oscars presentation. For the next decade, the results were given in advance to newspapers for publication at 11 p.m. on the night of the awards. So newspapers know in advance now, but on TV, the actors themselves don't know until it's announced, so you can get their reaction.
God, could you just imagine? I don't know. That would be so much power if you're a journalist, a newspaper, to know these things. Yeah. I can't.
Well, and that makes sense. Like on all the shows this morning, the people have like prepared mock-ups of the dresses that were there and all of these things that they were able to do. And if they had enough time to know who was going to win and whose outfit to look out for, I guess that makes sense.
I mean, sorry, I'm just like, my snarky comments cannot just help. It just feels so obnoxious. No. The world's falling apart and we're like stressing over outfits. Like,
people like it's okay to distract and take a breath before diving back into getting serious work done in the world sometimes.
Sure, I know, but it's just such a display of just like blatant like wealth and just see them so frivolous that most people can't actually relate to. And I,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry,
Well,
I have feelings.
I think, 2020 certainly gave people, it popped the bubble a little bit of Hollywood. But I have noticed this year, as we're getting to the Saturn Jupiter sextile and square this year, people are kind of settling back into that. And it's this interesting shift to see, like, we could have turned away entirely, but we decided to go back to the familiar and the comfortable in some ways. For whether that's a good thing or a challenging thing, that's to the individual.
You know, I think part of the reason I've so started thinking about this to sort of jump off the chart for a moment. I mean, I'm from Detroit, right, which is very much an industry city. You're from a coal town. And I think about, right, like in Detroit, like everyone's somehow related to like the auto industry, whether like if you're, in the events industry, you're like catering to auto stuff. If you're like an artist, you're probably making your money somehow related to auto stuff, right? People work in factories. Like it's a very much like we understand it's an industry city and it is what it is, right? But like in LA, it's so fascinating because it's like it really is an industry city, but it's like there is this sort of, air to it that it feels like this sort of illusion of grandeur. Like, it's like
Mhm.
bigger houses, more money, like things are sort of like there's sort of this sort of abundance that you don't have in a city like Detroit. But it's fascinating being here because like I don't know, it just seems like everybody's like somehow related, like working in the movies. And you really sort of see that when there's like a strike because then everyone's
Mhm.
out of work, right? Same as Detroit, right? And you really do feel like, oh, at its core, this is just like a labor city with very this sort of Neptune laid over it, right? Like it just
Exactly.
seems
Yeah.
there's this illusion of something more, but really at the end of the day, it's just like it's an industry city. And I don't
Mhm.
know. And I think that that's why it's so fascinating to go back to the histories of something like the Oscars because um I know I'm seeing that too. Because I don't know, it really shows you the sort of core of the sort of where the sort of this is just one way we started building this sort of the scaffolding of illusion, if you will.
Mhm. Also, shout out to Carl for finding the time. 7 p.m. is correct. So this
How
chart
did you
works.
find it, by the way? Is it
Where
7 PM
can you cite
Eastern?
the source, Carl? Not that I don't believe you. I just want to appreciate the work you did. Also, Amber over here makes a really good point about the Neptunian illusion in the industry, that
Yeah.
half of the time the actors don't even own what they're wearing or what they're taking to the Oscars because it's part of their contract, or, Louis Vuitton made this custom, but you don't own it. It's not yours. This is all rented jewelry and glamour. So that sort of delusion of grandeur, as you were saying, is the rented runway or rented red carpet.
Oof, I love that. And yeah, also, is it 7 PM Pacific or Eastern time? Like now I'm
I would
like,
assume it's Pacific.
okay,
If you
that's what I'm assuming
Yeah,
too. But
yeah,
um yeah. Yeah. Let's I'm looking at this chart again now. I'm
yeah.
like digging in.
Now that we can
It's
trust
interesting.
it.
Well, it's interesting too because it's a sun, the sun is squaring. I'm like, I could do this at their fix. The sun's
Mhm.
squaring Neptune here, right? So you have that
Yeah.
like that Rahu Jupiter sun just like in Taurus, just more resources, more beauty, right? Like
Mhm.
hyped up, like making the square to Neptune in Leo, the
Yeah.
illusion of performance.
Well, and it is interesting, like, all these resources, but do you actually have them? Or are your eyes, are you taking in more than you can actually hold? And so there's this thing of like, I have all this money to use, I have this budget, but when, like, the money doesn't actually exist until the bank lends it, or until something else happens and it follows through, or until some of the profits come in and you pay it back, which a lot of the time it was this loan of, which a loan is fake money. It's money you don't have until
Yeah.
you can pay it back, and then you had it. So it's a very interesting thing when you think about the way movies are made. They are all starting out in debt.
Oof, I love it. Can I just speak to and again, I'm going to speak to an Oscar moment that you can probably I'd love people's thoughts on. Um so some of the discussions people were having around me thinking about Neptune issues about right, this idea of like the Oscars, one of the things it does is it really kind of shifts the I want to say like the cultural narrative, right? Like if a film wins the Oscars, it tends to get like a second round of viewing, right? It's it's kind of like it's what marks history, right?
Mhm.
Like it's like maybe a lot of people came out for a certain film, but like the Oscar shows, like we go back to the Oscars to see what was quote like notable, right? And something people were talking about is the Oppenheimer getting
Mhm.
awards. Like
Yeah.
speaking very vaguely because I know it's, but like Barbie, right? This whole like sort of Barbie's like lack of awards and how just kind of like fucked up that is because like clearly if you go back and like remember the
Barbenheimer.
people's experience, right? It's like everyone was just like, I don't know. I feel like all all of my social feeds and just people were just like so into Barbie. Like
Mhm.
everyone saw that film. People tend to really enjoy it and dress up and there was so much about it. But then like, I don't know. I don't know anybody who saw Oppenheimer, right? Like I mean, again, I'm speaking to people around me. This is not facts, but it does feel there's something to be
Mhm.
said about like the incongruency between like the reality of the situation and what gets marked by the awards and the historical ledger.
Well, and I think there's something to be said about culture versus sort of the art proficiency, right? Like,
Mhm.
what are they voting on? Which was most popular that year, or which had the most emotional impact, which is one measure of art? Or are they
Yeah.
saying which took the most skill and effort from these people who are receiving the awards, whether it's costume or actor or whatever? Um, and again, that is very subjective. So I think
Mhm.
as someone who's gone who knows as much as I do, which is not as much as I could about movies, I it didn't surprise me that Oppenheimer won more awards for what it achieved in a movie experience or a cinematic skill set. But I think if you were looking at which made the biggest impact culturally and socially, that award would have gone to Barbie.
I don't know though. Like it's funny because I was really I was not into Barbie when it came out. I was just annoyed. Like everyone was into it and I was just like, guys, this is just so it's Barbie. Like I don't
Mhm.
understand it. Like like I just was not the did not want to see it. That being said, after spending time like doing some research, listening to some interviews, talking to people,
Mhm.
that film felt like it really did some big achievements, like with acting, with set
Yeah,
design. And so,
set
you know,
design
technically,
especially.
I would say it did. Anyways, I'm making an argument for Barbie is what I'm doing apparently.
Which is interesting to me. We had a lot of conversations about it when it came out. Yeah, but it's
um,
interesting 'cause, one of the things they pointed out yesterday when they were talking about visual effects as compared to
yeah,
scene design, because those are 2 separate things. You know, Godzilla won visual effects, which shout out to my brother and my entire childhood for all the Godzilla movies we watched. But Barbie was noted as they just built all of it. They just built all of it. There was not a
isn't
lot of
that
visual
insane?
effects that went into it. That's super impressive and does deserve some recognition to be able to rebuild nostalgia to that effect is pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. And anyways, this wasn't meant to sort of. I know I opened this up to like a is Gabe says this sort of Barbieheimer moment, but truly, I just think something interesting about the thinking about this idea of Neptune, right? What is reality
Mm,
versus what we're presenting as reality,
yeah.
or
Also,
can
I'm
you even get to reality?
yeah,
Mhm.
right? Especially in a movie. But I'm also being, educated here that, in Oppenheimer, they were also practical effects. So they did not
Okay.
use visual effects in that either, which is interesting when you think about what Oppenheimer is about. And I do remember hearing, how that there were there were results to those effects, that they used. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, anyways, I I just wanna point out, I know so little. I was just trying to think of, so last I'm sort of going on, I don't want people to think that I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
My very slim anecdotal evidence, but Devin says, "Awards shape future results. The male gendered voters may have
Mhm.
not seen" the male, quote, air quotes important to sit there, "gendered voters may not have seen Barbie."
Yeah, I have
Interesting.
a similar comment about how, many of the people making decisions are assigned male at birth. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yep.
How do you see that in the chart? Like, are you seeing, like, what are we?
I mean, if you look at the Venus again and the Mars being the one in Leo in the 10th, especially at this point, Venus is in detriment, doesn't have any of her dignities going for her. I don't think Mars is in early degrees, so he doesn't have a ton. Aside from the fact that he's at least not the malefic of sect, but he is in the 10th. He is the ruler of the chart because it's a Scorpio rising. If this time is actually the time, and he's got the culmination going on for him. A little bit far from the MC, but he is in the 10th house.
It is interesting. It's interesting that, like,
Oh, sorry. Also, that Sun Jupiter, thinking about judges and kings, Sun and Jupiter with the North Node, those two very masculine, the benefic and the sect light together, and also the ruler of the 10th being there. So
I like that it's interesting too, like, it all kind of comes back to Venus essentially, right? Like, 'cause that detriment Venus, that Venus in a hard place, which is interesting too. If you think about, like, Venus in the land of Mars, like, Venus, it almost feels like thinking about, like, Barbie on the war scene or something,
I
right?
was saying
There is
Barbie
that,
and Oppenheimer. Yeah.
yeah, right? Like, it just feels like, and we can, we think the sort of Weinstein moment too, right? There's just this, like, Venus is in rough shape, right? Like, trying to hold it
Oh,
together.
yeah.
But then also Venus rules Taurus, where the sun is, which is what rules, like, Leo, right? So there's this sort of, like, this sort of dominoes effect, but it all does come from that, like, sort of troubled Venus, which is fascinating to think about. We could also say is Venus is the stand-in for the artists, like the artists who are, the technical artists, the actor artists, right? Fascinating.
Performance artists, I guess you could say.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's
Gabe is sorry, go on.
no, I love Gabe. And Gabe, I will say, I witnessed a moment where Vivi almost bought color in Greece. That
I bought
happened.
a gold dress. I own some color, people. Now I'm scared to wear it, so I'll be off brand, but
No.
it exists. Pink name
You would
tag over
rock
there.
anything you decided to wear.
Thank you. Where are we on time? We have some time. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, we have some, so I'm all discombobulated because I'm thinking like 3 weeks into the future right now. I just filmed my eclipse video before coming on here because I have to schedule everything so far in advance because I'll be gone for a week and a half. So I'm going to look at the transits for this week to make sure I'm thinking about the right ones before I start talking about them.
I love
This
it.
week
Also,
actually
say
is the quieter week, isn't it? It's the one where really for between now and the weekend, it's Venus coming into Pisces today, and then the sun conjoins Neptune at the end of the week.
I just, isn't it funny how just Saturn can just, like, a malefic can really just spoil the party. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, especially Saturn. Yeah. Like
It's
Mars, I think
just
you
you're
can make
like,
an argument about like, is it an exciting party?
oh,
But
yeah.
Saturn, I'm not really sure. Saturn's like, go home. I need to go to bed kind of party. The party ends at 5 p.m.
Saturn's just in the corner. Can you just do your Saturn face for those watching the video? Because it's so good.
Oh God. Okay, hang on. I have to get control over my face, but that's it.
Yeah,
That's how
so
it
Saturn is like you, like, trying to enjoy your dinner, and that just look, just staring at, your dinner, your dance, whatever it is you're trying to do and thoroughly enjoy yourself,
goes.
you're just gonna cue the look. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because that is who I turn into when a party goes too long. If I get tired, that's my face. I was once my friend invited me I came to visit her and she was like, I'm going to a cocktail party with all of my other friends. Come with me. And I was like, cool. And it started at like 7 and I'm like, fine, I can push myself to 11. That's cool. 2 a.m. rolls around. I am on a stool in the corner and it was like, I think she referred to it as my murder face, which frankly would be more Mars, but it was just like, I have nothing nice to say. I'm going to keep everything to myself. I need to go to bed. As soon as people were like, okay, well, I guess we're all going home, I got my second wind and I was super nice to everybody again because I knew I had a path out, but it's a thing.
I
Thank
love
you,
it.
Devin. Thank you.
Also, you wake up at 4 a.m. every morning, so that is insane to me.
I
And I
get
know
up
this about
early.
you.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna say a detour here, right? Like I know that like Mars, murders in Scorpio and Aries in very different ways, but I also think that there is a Saturnian murder as well. I feel like
I
Saturnian
feel like
murder
the
is
Saturnian is go ahead. Go ahead. You were gonna say something.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
Saturnian murder is like sleep murder from like sleep deprivation and like
Mhm.
starvation. I think there are ways Saturn does murder.
I feel like Saturn murders simply by waiting because if you just wait long enough, you win. So, and also to think of Saturn as Kronos or as that Grim Reaper kind of embodiment, there is the scythe that at the moment that it is meant to happen, at the end, the completion,
Yeah.
the boundary of life, that's where it is. So Saturn could easily be said, if you wanted to stretch it a little bit, as the one who gets to decide when that is. And maybe it's sooner than other people would think.
Yes. But and I also think if
Mhm.
Saturn wanted to murder you, the way Saturn would do it by just like not feeding, it would just be like by withholding things, like
Mhm.
icing you
Yeah.
out, no food,
Damn it. Yeah.
no like like sadness because like you don't get hugged. Like I feel these are all
It would
Saturnian
be through
torture.
restriction. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for the
Yeah, and we know.
clarification, Seven.
Yeah.
Mars doesn't rule death, it rules the things that can lead to totally. I just wanna
Mhm.
think about, in storyline here, how the
Yeah.
planets would murder. Ooh, how would Venus murder? I have some ideas.
Would poison. Just makes me think of the poison rings. Um, that, it'd be something that if it were Venus, it would be something that probably wouldn't mar the appearance or wouldn't be gruesome, but would be, the femme fatale kind of approach.
Ooh, like a, was it what is that, Basic Instinct? What was the like, where the, like no, it's not Basic
How did we
what is
get
the
here?
film from like the '90s where someone gets, like, death by high heel? God, I'm so bad with film
Oh,
trivia.
I
Yeah,
am
a
not
death
sure.
by high heel. Huh?
I said, I'm not sure. I don't know how we got to this conversation.
Sorry, I really
Yeah.
okay, last thing. Was it Veruca Salt and which is the one who just gets really big in Willy
Yeah.
Wonka?
That's isn't her name
Is
Veruca's
Veruca
the one
Salt
that
just
wanted an A or that wanted one of the
oh,
wanted
golden egg,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah. What was her name? Violet. Violet Beauregard.
Violet's the one
Violet,
who
you're
just
turning
wants to
violet. Well, no, she turned into a blueberry because she was I think she was the gum chewer, and there was a gum that had a ton of flavors to it. Augustus Gloop was the one that ate everything. I don't
I
know why
feel
I know
like
this.
I feel Willy Wonka is all just, like, difficult Venus problems. I mean, it does
Potentially.
take
Yeah.
place in, like, a candy
I mean,
factory, like
I'm surprised there's no association with the 7 deadly sins somewhere. There should have been more kids in the factory, I guess, but yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. I'll drop this thread.
Uh, yeah.
What are you looking forward to this week, KristaLyn?
I'm looking forward to going to Egypt this week.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to tomorrow when I have like this ritual before a trip when I'm going to be gone for a long time,
Mhm.
because I have to. There's a lot of dysregulation that comes with travel, which is worth it to me. But I also prepare myself for that and try to accommodate myself as much as possible. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow when I have literally nothing I have to do because all of my packing is organized and ready, and all of my work is done, and I have no meetings or anything, and I'm just gonna enjoy Chinese food and my company with my dogs. And I'm looking forward to that before going on this trip. I just finished it's called a Way Be Clear spell that I did for the travelers. So any traveler who's watching this, spoiler alert, I did some magic for us that you will be able to accept in the form of a gift if you choose to when I get there. That was how I sort of did the I believe in magical consent. It's a huge thing for me. So I made a crystal for each person on the trip, and if they want the spell or the magic, they can accept the crystal. If not, I keep it. It's no big thing. But that's kind of how I was working with consent in this spell. so that I can still
Ooh,
let
I
it
love it. I feel like magic consent needs to be like a topic of like a workshop at like Astromagia.
no. You know what? I think they're going to be
Like
asking
an
for
actual thing. I think that that's like a
yep,
thing, like thinking about like all the weird, we always hear stories about like dubious magicians. We're all just kind of like that guy. But I think like it's a
yeah,
real, I feel
it
like
is.
it feels like an important conversation.
Yeah, I experienced some of that drama firsthand last year. So
I, I know you
I
did.
learned. I learned from it, and I this time when I wanted to do the spell for everybody, I was like, but what if there's someone who's uncomfortable with it? How can I make sure that I can let it be a surprise for them, and it's there if they want it, but also they can choose not to take it, and that's why I went with the crystals. And hi, Angela. Yeah, thank you.
By the way, I think your IG went down. Someone said in my IG. Can you see?
It looks like it's still going. It's
Okay, cool.
slow,
Maybe
so I don't
someone
know.
else.
Um,
Oh,
yeah, it's still moving on my end over here.
okay, rad.
Guiding Tarot said, "Enjoy your trip. It's exciting." Hi, Guiding Tarot. Hopefully, you see this.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm excited for your trip. Like, oh, I hope okay. I hope you're gonna come back and like give us a. Well, I know you're gonna give us the big updates and send us photos.
Mhm.
And yeah, and we both. I know we're kind of rounding out here. We both just launched
Mhm.
classes.
Yeah, so I'm doing Deity Academy where I'm getting resources from all over the place. I have met Shinto monks now, uh, which I'm very excited about that I will be kind of incorporating into our work just so we can have an appreciation of the way spirituality embodies itself in different
Yeah.
corners of the world and how to connect with that, differentiating between open practices and not, how to discover those kinds of things, and how to connect with energies of even mythological things. Understanding mythology of different pantheons is really exciting to me. Um, and I launched a student study tier, which also grants access to consultations with me on my Patreon. So I have that now, so I can still offer these things in a reasonable amount to allow myself to continue my studies, which is very exciting too. And we have plenty of space open if anybody does want to travel with us and go to Japan in the end of the summer. We have some spots open for that. And if you want, you can DM me. I'll get you a discount.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Um, I'm about to this week. I'm launching a class with my fellow writer and former university professor, or yeah, I mean, still professor, not teaching at the moment, but writer and professor Cameron Steele of Interruptions. And we are launching a 6-week course called The Fire at Night, which explores
Great.
storytelling through astrology. We are going to be looking at the work of, I think it's like 5 different writers, and then also looking at their charts to see how their charts come into play with their work. So today we're actually doing an interview with the writer Alicia Kennedy, who wrote a book called No Meat Required, as a sort of like teaser. Her work is something that we're going to be discussing in class. So I'm really excited about that. This is actually the first like robust course I've ever worked on
Yeah.
with anyone. So
Yeah.
I
That's
love
awesome.
you can sign up for both of our classes. You can sign up for the
Yeah.
storytelling and the um uh deity, what's it called?
Deity
Academy?
Deity
Deity
Academy, and it'll be lasting all summer. We're going to have resources to read ahead of a sort of hour and a half long intensive. So you'll be able to read a ton of resources to get a really good in-depth understanding and come up with good questions. Then we'll have a conversation, and then afterwards we'll have practicum of how you can put things into practice. So
I love it. So you can like get your like deity knowledge, then you can come over to us and you can read some contemporary uh, cr- uh, creative nonfiction, and right, like bring the whole thing together.
mhm.
And my ours is sort of a writing workshop as well. So I love
Yeah,
it. So everyone, go
awesome.
home, sign up for our courses.
And if you are home, think about if you want to sign up for the courses. But also
Also,
have a very gentle day. Venus is moving into Pisces, which means she's currently at that energetic degree. I've been seeing some manifestations of that here in some of the themes for Venus I've been studying for the past 6 months or so. So take very gentle care.
the Venus, yeah, it's been a She's loud right now.
She's loud, and she
She's
should
loud.
be. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, also, by the way, we are Ask Me Astros, and I'm actually to see if I can find someone else who can, I'm gonna try to publicly harass Gabe to join me next Monday because you are in
Yeah.
Egypt.
Yeah.
But you'll be back the following week, and people can always send us their astrology questions at askmeastros.com
Yes.
because that's actually what we're here for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is just us showing you a preview of how we'll dive into your chart. If you have a question, especially if it's specific to you, we will do that. You will get basically a free reading anonymously that you can watch
Yeah.
live. And also you'll be able to get a code that gives you a free reading with both of us individually. So you get 3 interpretations of your chart, which is really cool.
And also, if you just have like an astrology question or something you want to talk about, like this is just our space to have some like
Yeah,
free form astrology talk. So keep your questions during the week, your thoughts, share them with us, and have a beautiful day.
yeah. Thank you guys.
Bye.